Hello to everybody, my name is Stefano, and welcome to this episode of the Think and Analyze podcast. Okay, so as I announced in the previous episode, today we are dealing with the question: are you idealizing things? So let's start immediately with what I mean with idealizing something, in case that wasn't self explanatory. When you idealize something, you basically picture in your head how that something should be, regardless of the actual situation, and according to preconceptions you have in your head. Now, these preconceptions might be the result of a number of different things. Still, I believe we can categorize the reasons why might idealize things into three cases. First of all, and less problematic, I believe, is just inexperience. So since you basically know hardly anything about a specific thing, you tend to idealize it. But that's a natural mechanism of our brain simply because with the few pieces of information you have, you try to come to a conclusion, which might be wrong or might be correct. We don't know that. But if it is wrong, you have a picture in your head which is wrong and actually different from reality. So that's an idealization which leads to a wrong image in our head. Second case, you might have been raised in an environment where people tended to complain a lot and say things like, it should be this, it should be that, so that you grew up with a set of expectations towards reality. Third case, which I believe is a little worse than the second, is you might have been raised in an environment where people around you where people around you tended to overthink a lot about everything. However, overthinking often implies that everything has to be defined in detail, which basically means, on a subconscious level, that everything has to be perfect and thought out. Okay, so now that we define the reasons why one may idealize things, let's talk about why it is wrong or at least non beneficial. First of all, thinking that things should be perfect leads you to have expectations towards reality that are impossible to meet. As a matter of fact, how many times do we hear things like we are not perfect or we all make mistakes and so on? That makes you realize that reality, as long as I know it, is not perfect at all. And there are always flaws here and there, and so if you idealize things, you basically want what doesn't exist. However, idealizing things not only makes you want something that doesn't exist, but it also makes you regard as imperfect everything that's real, that's tangible. To put in other words, and by the way, this is the second aspect, if you want everything to be perfect, that means you dislike everything that is not perfect. But because all reality is not perfect, you are basically disliking everything around you. And this leads to you to have a negative and derogatory approach towards reality. Finally, idealizing things prevents you from actually seeing where real and tangible problems are when you look at situations or things. As a matter of fact, you will think the problem is that what you're looking at is not as you think it should be, when in reality, if you had a realistic approach, you will find where the actual problem is, given there's actually one. Now, this whole theory might have helped you in understanding what I mean. However, I believe a couple of examples would be very useful. Okay, so by the way, these examples are all the fruit of my experience, we should say. In the past, I used to idealize quite much how people should behave towards me. And the closer people were to me, the more I had a set of expectations towards them. However, these expectations didn't match the people I was taking into consideration. So, for example, I had, I still do, a group of friends I used to hang out with, and they were all in contact with other groups of friends from their respective hometowns. On the other hand, I didn't have a group of friends in my hometown. So when I would ask them to hang out, they would often say they were already busy. They were busy with their older friends. And that kinda frustrated me because I thought if they were good friends, they would find the time to hang out with me. Now, the perception was actually wrong. As a matter of fact, I expected them to hang out with me more than with their older friends, and that's basically nonsense. And that's where it gets tricky. My sentence, if they were good friends, they would find the time to hang out with me, is correct, in the sense that, of course, if someone is your friend, they should hang out with you, if you want it. However, in my case, it's not that they didn't want to hang out with me. They were simply busy with other friends as well. So even if my statement was correct, it was not relevant to my situation. It was actually distorted so that my ego, I would say, could be pleased and think that it was their fault. And it was not simply a sort of situation, a normal situation which might happen. Another example I want to make is about going out. Some time ago, I remember I would see people I knew, doing things with their friends on Instagram, and I was like, that seems fun. I would like to do that as well. I came from the perspective that when you are with your friends, you should always have a lot of fun, and that no quiet moments were allowed. That was sort of my idealization. So what would happen was that while I was with my friends, we had fun, but not the fun I wanted, which was, however, impossible to reach for reasons I'll explain in a second. And so I would be disappointed. I was idealizing the type of fun we should have had while being together, and so I disregarded everything that was below that sort of threshold. I would disregard it, not in the sense that I didn't have fun, but in the sense that I always felt a little dissatisfied, thinking, yeah, but we should have had more fun. Just like the first example, the truth was that I had the wrong perspective. Firstly, what I would see on Instagram was obviously a small fraction of what other people did together. I saw the best part, probably, and I ended up thinking that that was their average level of fun when actually it wasn't. Or with there was a lot of probability that it wasn't the case. Secondly, different people do different things and behave differently as well. And so it was exceptionally wrong to see one person doing one thing, doing sort of behaving in a specific manner, and then thinking that my friend should do and behave, do the same and behave the same. And I'm gonna be honest, now that I'm saying this, now that I'm actually telling you what I thought some time ago, I actually can't believe what I used to think. That seems like so wrong. I don't even know how I ended up thinking this. Thirdly, and this was kind of an epiphany for me, I subconsciously thought that the sort of input to do fun things should come from my friends and not from me. So I didn't have the right vibe to have fun because when a group has genuine fun, it's because everyone contributes almost equally, or at least as best as they can. But me standing there doing nothing to bring positivity into the group while expecting other people to do the positive stuff, I was clearly wrong. And also, if other people are less willing to do different and fun things, they can and should be encouraged. Like if I suggested to do something, that would have already been an improvement. Now, these examples regard mostly the social world because that was my experience. However, I believe one could find many other examples of idealizing something, even in other fields, such as work or generally everyday life. I want to end this episode with this thought. Idealizing or being a perfectionist means to set the infinitely high standards that cannot be reached. As a consequence, you remain stagnant because the goal is so far you can't even understand what to do, and so you are even frustrated. Instead, if you set your standard to reality, as soon as something happens and you don't like it, you can try to improve it. In this way, you don't have your mind blurred by expectations. You see one specific thing, you realize that's what you don't like, and you can change it. Okay, so that was it for this episode. As I said, this was closely related to the previous one and sort of this theme of idealizing, waiting for the perfect moment. I believe they are closely related. And I don't know, honestly, if there's something I should talk about always regarding this topic. I believe these two episodes might address uh, for the most part, this sort of problem. With that said, see you guys.